Hi, everybody. Welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe. So I don't know if you saw the live stream that I recently did, but the Scripture Citation Index is finally updated with this most recent General Conference. And what I do, in case you're new to the channel, is I'll use that website, the Scripture Citation Index right here by BYU. I'll go down to search, and then I will search General Conference talks. They go back to 1942 on this website. And then I'll search for keywords and phrases that are of interest to me. So for example, Second Coming, search, and then it'll show you all the General Conference talks where the term Second Coming shows up. And then I'll just count up how many times it appears in any given year. And then I'll put the tally on this spreadsheet. And by doing so, you can definitely see patterns, and you can definitely see times where the church is emphasizing certain ideas and concepts. And sometimes it's pretty stunning. So I would encourage you to do this yourself, but you can also just come here to my spreadsheet. The link for my spreadsheets is in the description box of each video. The tab is called Timeline Phrases. You can quickly navigate to it by clicking on the three bars at the bottom left, and then just come down to Timeline Phrases. Or you can check out all the rest of my spreadsheets that I've put together. Okay. So there are a lot as you go to the right. What I've decided to do this time, in times past, I would go through the entire thing. Last time I I changed it up a little bit where I just wanted to focus on words and phrases that stuck out to me for that conference. So I'm doing the same thing here, only I'm not going to go over all this over here to the right. There was nothing that really stood out to me too much with these words and phrases as you go to the right. But to the left, I've picked out all the ones that really stood out to me, so it can be a little bit more concise. Okay, so the first one, we actually already talked about this even before the Scripture Citation Index updated. I noticed that President Nelson used the term Millennial Messiah. Okay, so for all of 2024, there was one General Conference talk that used the phrase Millennial Messiah, and it was President Nelson's most recent talk. The last time that we see Millennial Messiah, and I have here talk only because this also searches the footnotes, but in this case, I was not wanting to see when Elder Bruce R. McConkie's book, The Millennial Messiah, was being referenced, because it's been referenced a number of times in General Conference. I wanted to see when the term Millennial Messiah actually showed up in the body of the talk. So we have President Nelson in 2024, and then President Nelson again, before he became the president of the church. He was president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, and he used this term in 2017. And then the only other time that we see it, you have to go back to Bruce R. McConkie in 1982. And this was the year that his book called Millennial Messiah was published. If you don't know anything about that book, you should consider reading it. Go to this website, archive.org, if it'll pull up. Yeah, here we go. It's a free online library, and you can just do the Millennial Messiah, Bruce R. McConkie, and then you can read it. I think there's a couple copies of it on here. So here it is. Okay, so anyway, let's go back to this. So that's kind of interesting because the Millennial Messiah book is all about the Second Coming, and I've noticed that President Nelson a couple different times seems to have made reference to that book. I think that, he is on the same page as Elder Bruce R. McConkie when it comes to the Second Coming. And this is one example of that. So, okay, let's go to the next one. So and by the way, I kind of put these together in categories. So this first category that we're talking about has to do with words and phrases that are talking about Christ as king during the millennium, when his political kingdom has been installed and he rules over the earth. So you have Millennial Messiah. The next one is King of Kings. And you'll see that in 2023 and 2024, you have these darker colors. You have a 4 and a 3, meaning 4 talks in 2023 and 3 talks in 2024. And then you can see just kind of like a clustering or a spike, maybe from 2014 until 2024. When you go back in time, you don't see it so much. Here's one other kind of like grouping right here, mostly in the 90s and the early 2000s. And then before that, you could say there's maybe another one right here in the 60s. But aside from that, there's not like a ton. So I'd say that there's kind of like 3 main spikes or times of higher frequency. And one of those is right now. You know, there was this period of time between like 2005 and 2013 where you hardly saw it at all, but now it's kind of come back to life. And there isn't a time that I've seen, let me just double check, where you see like these 2 numbers or like 2 high numbers together, like 3 and 4, like 1 year after another. You go back in time, you do have some 4s, there's some 3s, 4s, but no. So you have these last 2 years that are relatively high in use of the term King of Kings. Okay, and then we have Christ lives, and you see that in 2024, that term was used 6 times. And when we're talking about Christ lives, we're talking about the fact that he's not dead. He is a resurrected being. He's real. And when he comes for the second coming, we're going to see that he lives and that he's resurrected, right? So that's why I have that grouped together with these other terms. So 6 times in 2024. Let's look at what it looks like as you go back in time. And you start to see more white and more ones. You know, there's a lot less of it as you go back in time. Geez, especially in the 40s and 50s. So it really starts to ramp up probably in about 2009. And then 2024 is in first place for the number of times that Christ lives has been used in general conference talks. There's no other year where you see it 6 times. Okay. Let's see. Was there another one in this category? No. Okay. So for this category of Christ during the millennium, Christ as king, Christ being resurrected, I feel like there's a pattern here that they're really thinking about that, because you have a spike, probably mostly from like maybe 2014 until present. So over the last decade, but especially over the last couple of years, if you look at 2024 and 2023. So I think that's really on their minds. Okay, the next category has to do with the timing of the second coming. Words and phrases that seem to suggest that it's sooner rather than later. So I know that Caitlin with Anticipating Christ's Return has done a video about the difference between in coming days and in a coming day. And she did like a search in like Chat GPT, I think, if I remember right. And it said that in a coming day is like it's more imminent than if you say in coming days. Okay, so let's look at in a coming day. So we have one for 2024. And it was President Nelson talking about the second coming. These other ones, I'm not sure of the context because I'm not going to search every single talk and check the context, but I think it's still valuable when you just kind of see the overall picture. But in any case, so you have kind of a spike from 2016 to 2019, and then you hardly see it at all before that, like hardly at all. Okay. Here's one in 1985. But aside from that, you know, the mid 2000s and then the late 2010s. And then you have this most recent one in President Nelson's talk. So that's kind of interesting in a coming day. Okay, preparing the world. You can see there's a spike from 2018 until now. Go back in time. And you don't hardly see it at all, just like 3 other times. 1982, 2002, 2011. Aside from that, every other time that it's been used has been during President Nelson's presidency, starting with his first year as president of the church. Okay, now this one is one of the more exciting ones for me. Final phase. So now we're up to 3 for 2024. Okay. Final phase. And then we have 3 other times from 2020 to 2022. Go back in time and you don't see it at all. So the only time that, the only times that final phase has been used has been during President Nelson's presidency, starting in the year 2020. And of course, because it was 2020. But then we have this relatively big spike in 2024 with 3 times. You see how this like tells a story when you look at it this way? I feel like that's pretty clear. I feel like already what we've looked at, it's pretty clear what the leaders of the church are expecting in terms of the second coming. Okay, the next one, this is a combination of phrases. It's phrases like, it's never been more important, imperative, needed, things like that. Like we're in a unprecedented time where we've never needed this as much, whatever the thing is that they're talking about. So you can see this block right here from 2019 until present. Let's go back in time, and there's a whole lot more white empty cells. You do see it from time to time, starting in 1950, and then maybe just a couple times per decade at best. But all of a sudden, starting in 2019, it's really never been more important, imperative, needed, etc. Something's going on right here. Okay, let's go to the next one. Higher and holier. This one is also really dramatic. You have a 6 in 2018 and a 6 in 2024. I actually did a video about this phrase, higher and holier. And what I found out was that anytime that this phrase is used, like in the scriptures, it's usually in reference to a change in dispensation, going from like one dispensation or period of apostasy to another, to a new dispensation. Okay. Higher and holier. You may not think about that just looking at it on the surface. It's like, oh yeah, higher and holier, like, coming closer to Christ and being more Christ-like and doing things in a better way. And that's true. That is true. But again, whenever it's used in the scriptures, it's usually because a new dispensation is being brought in. So we're going from this last dispensation into the millennium, and there's going to be this big shift. I think that's why this is being used. Okay, so let's look at what this looks like when you go back in time, higher and holier. Here's once in 1992, and that's it. And that's it. So that's pretty dramatic. So again, preparing the world, not so much in a coming day, kind of. Well, yeah, yeah. Coming day, 2007, or maybe more like 2016. So in a coming day, preparing the world, final phase, never been more important, imperative, needed, etc., higher and holier. These terms just come to life starting around the time that President Nelson becomes president of the church. Holier way goes along with higher and holier, and it's the same thing, with the exception that you don't see it at all before 2018. Okay, eyes to see. So we have a 4 for 2024. There was a 4 in 2022, 2012. Go back in time, and you don't see it a whole lot. There's a little bit of a spike in the 60s, but it doesn't compare to 2017 until 2024. And 2024, it looks like it probably ties for first place. It does. It ties with 2012 and 2022. Eyes to see, right? And that doesn't always have to be in the context of the second coming, but a lot of times it is. It's in the context of having the eyes to see and ears to hear and heart to feel the signs of the times and to know, where we're at as far as the timing of the second coming. So, but they're talking about that a lot. Do we have the eyes to see? President Nelson asked in his talk, or he said, I hope that we're not missing the grandeur of this moment in his talk about the second coming. And unfortunately, there are people that are missing it, and people that don't have the eyes to see and ears to hear. Okay, and then here is the phrase "in coming days," plural. Okay, so in a coming day, when that's used, it means that it's more imminent, but in coming days is also imminent, just maybe not as imminent as in a coming day. But look at this, 2018 to 2024, go back in time, you don't see it at all. In coming days. You guys, is this not dramatic? Is this not obvious? Are these not just the plain words of the prophets? Instead of turning to our own little pet theories and convoluted timelines and whatever, how about we just listen to the plain words of the prophets and apostles and other church leaders? There is a story being told here. We are being prepared for the second coming. I feel like it's safe to say that that's what's going on here. Here is just coming days instead of incoming days. When you do that, you pick up a couple more, like in 2020, 2021, and 2024, but it's marginal. Okay, days ahead. Here you go. We're seeing something similar. There's a 4 for 2024 compared to all these like 2s and 1s, 2s, and 3s. Let's go back in time. It gets more spotty. There's a spike in the 70s. If you're new to my channel, if you look at all the rest of these terms, like if you go all the way to the right, usually anything that has to do with the second coming, there's like a overarching pattern where you'll see typically a spike in like the late 60s and the 70s, and then another one during President Nelson's presidency. That's typically what you'll see a lot of the time. Not always, but a lot of the time. And I feel like here's another one. Days ahead, you have this spike during President Nelson's time, and then the other spike is back in the 70s. Okay, so those are the two spikes, and the biggest one would be during President Nelson's time, especially in 2024 with 4. Are there any other 4s? No, there's not. So this year was the record-breaking year for using days ahead. Okay, and then here's second coming. This year doesn't really stand out compared to previous years, but it does seem like it's part of this spike that, again, is centered on President Nelson's presidency, specifically the year 2020 with 12. But you see these dark colors right here. You go back in time, and it does come up. The second coming, it comes up frequently, but not as frequently as, here it is, the 70s, what I was just talking about, the 70s. There's a little bit here in the late 50s. It's like late 50s, 70s, and then it quiets down, and then it really picks up in a dramatic way starting in 2018. And then the most dramatic is the year 2020. Let me just double check. Yeah, there are no other 12s. There's a 9 in 1958, and that would tie with 2019 for second place. And then you have these 8s right here. You have 3 8s. So, second coming, you guys. Second coming. It's pretty clear. Okay, and that is it for these like words and phrases that have to do with what I feel have to do with like the timing of the second coming. I feel like it's really, really, really obvious. Okay, let's move on. Okay, now this next category, these are essentially like calls to action, trying to get you to change your ways, to repent, to make a course correction, things like that. So the first phrase is please remember. And so you can see just right off the bat, there's a spike right here from 2022 to 2024. You could probably also include 2019. You go back in time, and there is not a whole lot of please remembering going on. There is not. It comes up from time to time. You have a kind of like this smaller spike in the 2010s, you know, the mid 2000s and then the 2010s, but then it seems like something else is going on here starting in 2022. Please remember. The next one is please make. Like, please make it a priority to go to the temple, you know, stuff like that. There's a spike right here, 2021 to 2024. And then not a whole lot before that, except for, you know, right here in the 70s. And then 55. But you have these 2 years in a row with a 2. And 4, please make that. That's definitely a spike. Okay. Please remember, please make. The next one is plead with you. You have a dark 8 in the year 2022. Go back in time and it thins out. You mostly see just like 1s, 2s, and 3s. Here's a 4 in 1964, 1951, but that's pretty much it. So it gets a lot more solid and you get a lot more dark colors, starting with President Monson's first year as president of the church in 2008, probably from about that time until now. But the most dramatic in the year in first place would be 2022. Plead with you. The next one is urge. This one, you know, I don't know why I have this one on here. Probably just the fact that 2024. Yeah, that's why. So you don't really see the same thing here that you've been seeing with these other words and phrases, but you do see a spike in this year in 2024 with the word urge, with a total of 7. The last time that we saw 7 was in 2017, and before that, 2012. There was a lot more urge going on, it seems, during President... Well, I don't know. Maybe I don't know. There's been a lot more urging going on in the past than recently, which is kind of counterintuitive, but maybe, you know, that was the time. That was the time of urging, just in general, to get people prepared for the second coming. But I don't know. That's kind of the opposite of what we're looking at here with please remember, please make. So I don't know, but there's a spike in 2024. Interpret that however you want to. But now the next one, I think there's only one interpretation for invite you. Look at the dark red from 2017 all the way until 2024. Let's look at what it looks like when you go back in time. And of course, it thins out. It really does. Geez, especially in the 40s. There's like none in the 40s. Not a whole lot in the 50s. Picks up in the 60s. But really, it starts to pick up during President Monson's time, but the most dramatic change is from 2017 onward. There's a lot of inviting going on from 2017 until now. The biggest year for inviting, for I invite you, was 2020. Yep. Okay, promise you. You have 2 8s in a row for 2023 and 2024, and then 1 in the year 2020. There's a 9 in 2011. Aside from that, you go back in time, and it comes up frequently, but like it comes up like there's very few years where this isn't used, promise you, but it thins out, and there's kind of like a spike here in the late 80s, early 90s, and then a bigger one starting with President Monson's time, I would say, or maybe the end of President Hinckley's time until now, but even more so during President Nelson's time, because you have these 6s, 8, 7, 8, 8. So, okay, the next one, let God prevail. This is a term that President Nelson has kind of coined when he's been like studying Hebrew, and he was consulting with somebody that I guess was teaching him some Hebrew, and they said that the name Israel could be translated as let God prevail. So this has been a President Nelson thing, but I feel like he goes along with the rest of these because he's inviting us, he's asking us to let God prevail in our lives. You don't see let God prevail before President Nelson's time. So like I said, it's mostly a President Nelson thing. And that's it. That's it for the, urging you, trying to get you to do things, making promises to you. So I feel like there's a pattern there. There's been a lot more of these things going on lately in general. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Let's see. This one, that's right. Okay, so this one has more to do with this next category has more to do with like what it says here, attacks of the adversary, and also like staying firm and having a solid spiritual foundation. So kind of like warnings to the church to hold your ground, to follow the prophet, to not lose your discipleship in Jesus Christ, to not be persuaded by the enemy. Okay, so attacks of the adversary. You see there's a cluster or a spike starting in 2019 until now. Go back in time. There's one in 2011, 1994, 81, and that's it. Which is kind of surprising. I feel like I've heard this phrase all growing up. I would have thought that it would have shown up more in General Conference. There's probably different ways of stating this. But anyway, it's kind of dramatic once you get to President Nelson's time. There's much more focus on attacks of the adversary, or at least using that phrase in that way. The next one is against the church, and you see another spike right here. There's also kind of one here during President Monson's time. And then one in like the early 80s, a smaller one in the late 70s. And then the 40s kind of, but the one that I would say is on top, like the biggest spike, is probably this one from 2020 until 2024. Okay, so attacks of the adversary against the church. Here's the next one, own understanding. And I feel like that crowd, those that lean to their own understanding. And when I say own understanding, I'm not saying like people that are trying to do the best that they can. I'm talking about people that are like stubborn. That's really what the spirit of what this phrase means. When you see it in the scriptures, it's not like, oh, you think I'm like doing something wrong because I'm trying to learn. No, this is people that are prideful in what they think is right, or prideful in their own knowledge. And I don't need to listen to the prophet. I don't need to read the scriptures. I don't need the church to tell me what to do. That's what own understanding is referring to. Okay, so own understanding. Let's take a look at this. Let's go back in time, and you see it gets a lot more spotty and spaced out, a lot more empty cells as you go back in time. And so it kind of picks up 1995, the late 90s, there's a spike right there. And then the other spike, I would say, probably starts in President Monson's presidency. And then it's just like a solid thing year after year from 2016 until 2022. 2023 gets a pass, and then it picks back up in 2024 with 2. So generally, this term it's been on the increase in General Conference over the last decade and a half or so. Okay, so you have this first half, attacks of the adversary against the church, own understanding, and then you have the solution, or what we're being asked to do. And the first one is overcoming the world. And you see a spike 2022 to 2024. There's one in 2017. And then 1958, and that's it. I'd have to look at this closer. This may be something that President Nelson, another phrase that President Nelson coined. So I'd be curious to see if he's the one that first said that in 2017, aside from the 1958 one. So I don't know. I'd have to look at that closer, but I think that's kind of interesting, overcoming the world. So that would include overcoming attacks of the adversary and people that are trying to get you to go against the church or lean to your own understanding. You're overcoming that stuff. The next one is overcome the world. And so there's a really dramatic spike in 2023 and 2024. 2023 had more. It was at 13. 2024 was at 10. And then you have this kind of general spike right here, maybe from 2012 to 2022. So, yeah, okay. Let me take that back. So, no, I don't think that President Nelson did coin that. I was just focusing on this column right here. But here's overcome the world. And you go back in time and you see a lot of that. Not so much in the 40s. But there's kind of minor spikes here and there, early 70s, 80s, but really, it takes off probably starting either 2012 or 2017, and even more so 2023 and 2024. So it really must be the time, you guys, for us to overcome the world, especially in light of attacks of the adversary, people against the church, and people leaning to their own prideful understanding, quote unquote understanding. Okay, spiritual foundation. Look at 2024, 9. And it kind of tapers off when you go back in time. You do see it every now and again, but nothing comparing to or approaching President Nelson's presidency, starting in the year 2019 onward, with the biggest year being 2024 with 9. The next one is your spiritual. So this could be your spiritual life, your spiritual foundation, your spiritual well-being, things like that. So 2024 with 11, it's looking very similar to spiritual foundation, maybe because there's a little bit of a overlap between the two. But yeah, definitely a spike right here. Kind of more like 2020 to 2024. There's a spike right here. 2012 to 2015. There's kind of a spike here in the late 90s or late 80s, early 90s. And before that, there's not a whole lot. So 80s, 90s, but especially 2012 onward, and even more than that, 2020 onward, and even more than that, 2024 with 11. That's the top year. Okay, living prophets. So living prophets are a problem for people that are prideful, that want to dictate reality, interpret scriptures their own way, say what the church should or shouldn't do. Living prophets are a problem for that type. So that would go against this column U. Oh, that's fitting. Column U, your own understanding. Column U. That goes against column P. P for prophets. This is meant to be. Okay, so you see a spike right here, 2022 to 2024. There are other years that are higher, like 2015 2009, 1996. Go back in time, it thins out. 1972, 1962. So there are a lot of spikes for this phrase, but it seems like generally speaking, you see darker colors starting maybe 2017, or you could say maybe 2014 until now. So over the last 10 years. So that makes sense. It would seem to go along with attacks of the adversary against the church, own understanding. So those are the problems. And then this is the solution. Follow the living prophet. Okay. All right. And that's it for that category. Okay. Now the next one, this next category, it has to do with like emphasis on the covenant path. Being a covenant people. Okay. This one is also pretty dramatic. So the first phrase is we are his. And you can see these dark colors from like 2014 to 2024. Go back in time. You have lighter colors. You have less frequent use of this phrase. Hold on. Let me make it easier. Let me freeze this row right here. I should have done that in the first place. So it follows us as we go down. The only other like spike that really stands out would be the mid 60s to the mid 70s. But aside from that, there's not much. So the two big spikes are right now and then back in the 60s and 70s. But the bigger one is during President Nelson's time. We are his, meaning like we are a covenant people. We are bound to him through our covenants, right? We are his. The next one is covenant people. And look at 2024 with a whopping 11, you know? So for this one, maybe 2021 until 2024, that's a big spike. Go back in time. There's a spike in 1996. Yeah, but just not a whole lot. Not until President Nelson's time. Well, I guess you could say it kind of ramps up during, like, toward the end. Or maybe during President Hinckley, but it becomes, you have this solid block from 2016 to 2024, but more especially 2021 to 2024. Okay. The next one is your covenants. You can see a spike right here, 2019 until 2024. There's one in 2013. And surprisingly, not a whole lot before that. Just kind of onesies and twosies. And sometimes you have a 3. But the biggest one is definitely 2019 to 2024. Your covenants. Make and keep. And this one is not strictly make and keep covenants. Sometimes it's worded in different ways, but it's referring to covenants. So that's why I have covenants in parentheses. So here you go. A spike from 2019 until 2024. Make and keep covenants. Here's another one, like in the middle of President Monson's presidency. And I'm surprised by all this like white space. Now, it may just have to do with language and language patterns and culture when it comes to certain words and phrases. Like it may just come down to like linguistics and how some things become popular. I don't know. I'm not a linguist, but I'm still kind of surprised that you don't really see this until 1990. But whatever the case, it's really dramatic during President Nelson's time. Make and keep covenants. Covenant path. Now, I don't know that this is one that President Nelson coined. You can see that the first time it shows up in General Conference was in 2007. So I guess I'd have to research that, or maybe if you guys know who coined that phrase, let me know. I don't know I don't think it's in the scriptures. Covenant path. It might, I don't know. I don't think it is. Whatever the case, President Nelson really made it popular at the very least, starting in 2018, his first year as president of the church. And there's only 4 years where it got up into the 20s, 2018, 2019, 2022, and 2024. The top year was 2019 with 25. So anyway, this is pretty dramatic. So you can see a pattern here, right? We are his because of our covenants. Covenant people, your covenants, keep covenants, covenant path. Yeah, there's a lot of emphasis on that right now. Okay, and then the next one is of the veil. So again, you'd have to look at the context of each talk. But typically, when we're talking about the other side of the veil, we're typically talking about family history, research, and doing work for our deceased loved ones, gathering scattered Israel on the other side of the veil, right? So, big spike during President Nelson's time, excuse me, especially 2019 to 2021. 2024 got pretty high with 8, but go back in time and you don't see anything coming close to what we see during President Nelson's presidency of the veil. Okay, that's it for like covenants, making covenants on either side of the veil. So they are really, really stressing this. And the reason why, like, it's something that we all need to do in our life anyway. All of us need to make covenants. All of us need to be on the covenant path. We all need to do this. It doesn't matter what dispensation you live in. But as you get closer, in this case, to the second coming, that's your safest assurance of being okay when the Savior comes. Not only to avoid the burning of the wicked, but also just to be prepared for him being here in whatever you're going to be asked to do, or whatever events you'll be invited to. You know, there's probably going to be many different events that are only for him and his church, you know, which wouldn't include the other people that move on into the millennium that are good, but not members of the church. There's probably going to be exclusive things that you're going to want to be a part of. And when I say exclusive, don't be like, oh, are you talking about like, oh, like you think you're popular, you think you're cool because you got invited to? No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about like, you want to be worthy, just like how, when, the Palmyra, New York temple was dedicated, and it was like a church-wide dedication. They broadcast it. I don't know if it was like the entire church, but like it wasn't just the New York area. It was at least throughout the United States. And then the same thing with the dedication of the Nauvoo temple. That's something where you would have wanted to have made sure that you were ready, that you could have at least a temple that you could have a temple recommend, so you could participate in that. Because if you weren't worthy of a temple recommend, you couldn't participate. You couldn't go see the broadcast. You had to have a temple recommend. There may be lots of other things like that at the time of the second coming and afterwards, right? So that's one thing. The first thing would be your spiritual safety, both just in your life in general, but also in the lead up to the second coming. And this is essentially like being on the ark. This is what entering the ark is for the second coming, is being on the covenant path. And then when it comes to the dead, I really think that in order for them to be resurrected, they have to have their work done first on this side of the veil. And then they have to either accept or reject the work that's been done for them. And then at that point, they're resurrected to either a celestial body, a terrestrial body, or a telestial body. Now, these happen in a certain order. At the beginning of the millennium, you have the resurrection of those that are celestial. And so I would think that you would need to have your stuff all ready to go. Otherwise, you're going to have to wait until it's done. I think that's what's going to happen. So I think the church is focusing on getting as much of that done as possible before the second coming, so the maximum number of people can be resurrected and be part of that event. And then the rest will just go through the millennium. Later on in the millennium, you have those that are terrestrial that'll be resurrected later on. And then at the end of the millennium, and just before the earth is turned into a celestial world, that's when you have the telestial and the telestial resurrection, and at the very, very, very end, the sons of perdition get resurrected. Okay, moving on. I think I just have a couple more things. I have this word right here, just because it's been pretty dramatic. Now it's starting to taper off. It's starting to wind down. There's only 2 times that it was used in 2024. So I just wanted to kind of just point that out. And, I've done the, I've done the thought exercise before where what if you could go back in time and you had like a printout of this spreadsheet and you gave it to a member of the church all the way back in like 1942. Imagine what they would think if they could see this spreadsheet as they're looking forward into the future. A lot of what we've talked about already would probably raise their eyebrows, but especially, I think, Second Coming would probably be at the top of the list, maybe, but probably in the top 5 most interesting entries here might be the pandemic. Because if I was from 1942 and I was looking at this and I'd be like, what happens in 2020? What is going on there? That must be the time of the second coming. I would probably be thinking along those lines, but anyway, it's pretty dramatic. However you feel about it, it was a world-changing event. And I feel like it was a big test for a lot of people as far as how you treated others that you disagreed with. There were a lot of people that didn't do very well in how they talked about their differences in opinion and whatever. It was sad. Okay, the next one is New Jerusalem. This is really interesting. It was during President Nelson's talk this year that he brought up New Jerusalem. I don't know how many people in the church really have a good understanding that there's going to be 2 world headquarters, one in the Old Jerusalem and one in the New Jerusalem. If you're more of a nominal member of the church and you haven't really dug into the meat of the gospel, you may not know about New Jerusalem. So I think it's interesting that was brought up. It was brought up a couple more times during President Nelson's time in 2019, in 2020. Go back in time. There's one in 2008, 95. And then here's a big spike in the late 70s, early 80s. Another one in the mid to late 60s. So there was more talk about the New Jerusalem when you go back in time. And then it kind of dies off, starting in 1985. You hardly ever see it. And then you have this this relative small spike during President Nelson's time. But I think that's significant. And then Eclipse. That's another one. Most of the time, when this is brought up in General Conference, it's being brought up in a metaphorical way. You don't see it a whole lot, but it has shown up from time to time in General Conference. The one time that somebody was actually talking about an actual total solar eclipse, it was Elder Stevenson in 2017. And he's the one that noted that the 2017 Great American Eclipse happened on the same day as President Monson's, President Monson's 90th birthday. He pointed that out in General Conference. It's things like that give me reason to believe that there actually is significance when things like that coincide. So anyway, excuse me. And that's it. Okay, so that's it for this video. I don't know if I'm going to revisit this anytime soon because that's pretty much everything that stood out the most to me. But you can look at my spreadsheet anytime, like I said earlier, and you can go over here to the right and look at everything else that I've searched. There are a lot of other noteworthy things here, but I didn't want this video to go too long, so you can check this out. One other thing that I'll point out is when you get to the very far right, these are these are words and phrases that we have not seen in a very long time. And the ones that stick out the most to me is this one right here. The hour is not yet. You have to go all the way back 20 years to 2004 to hear that said in General Conference. The hour is not yet. You see it a lot more from like 1981 going backwards in time. So I think the hour is here, you guys. Times of the Gentiles, that's another one. You have to go even farther back to 1977. That's the last time that we saw Times of the Gentiles. And I think those are the two big ones. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, that's going to be it for this one. So if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe. Like this video if you liked it. Leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also, make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.